Good evening. The details for Saturday's funeral for the Duke of Edinburgh have just been announced, a service that, in keeping with the COVID restrictions being observed by the entire country, will be limited to just 30 guests. Alongside the Queen will be the couple's children and grandchildren, as well as members of Prince Philip's own royal family in Germany. Let's take a more detailed look. The Queen will be accompanied by a lady-in-waiting as she is driven behind the coffin. The Duke's children, Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, will all be attending. They'll be socially distanced, will wear face masks and will not sing. His grandchildren will also be in attendance, including the Duke of Sussex, who has flown over from the US for the event. Members of the family will not be wearing military uniform. Let's bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, very difficult, of course, this for the Queen, limiting the funeral to 30 mourners. But who will be there apart from those we've just mentioned?
So I think you're right, Mark. It was always going to be of interest to see exactly how they managed to strip down that congregation to just include 30 people when you think that the Queen and the Duke have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, 10 great-grandchildren. And you won't be surprised to hear, of course, that all of the children, their partners, also all of the grandchildren, their partners, are all included in that congregation. But also there on the list that we've been given over the last few hours are Princess Margaret's 2 children. You also have 3 of the Queen's cousins, they're also included. One of Prince Philip's cousins, the Countess Mountbatten of Burma, and also some names that people probably aren't so familiar with. We also have 3 of Prince Philip's German relatives, so 2 great-nephews and also a cousin of Prince Philip are also all included. Now, in terms of those who've travelled over from Germany, we understand that they have been abiding by all of the government regulations when it comes to isolating because of COVID, but they are, of course, allowed to attend the funeral on the weekend. But yeah, it is very much a family affair. Of course, in any other time, any other year, you would have expected hundreds of people to attend the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, but because of COVID, that very small 30 congregation, all of whom will fit inside the choir, that very intimate space inside St George's Chapel. And we're told that any members of staff who are anywhere near the chapel, they're simply there to make sure that proceedings run as they should. We're also given a few more details about the funeral procession and also the service as well. So we know that it's going to be the Prince of Wales and Princess Anne who will lead some of that procession of other members of the family. Of course, also Prince William, Prince Harry are going to be involved. Between them, however, as they're walking, will be their cousin, Peter Phillips. Also, we now know that the Queen will travel by car behind the coffin. She'll be in that car with a lady in waiting. Also, as other people who are carrying out funerals at the moment, there will be social distancing in place. Also, all the congregation will wear face masks and they will not sing. But also, we've been getting more details about the ways that Prince Philip has been involved in shaping his own funeral. And some new pictures have been released of that rather unique vehicle which will carry his coffin during that procession. So this Land Rover that he helped to design, which I think is a lovely touch for a man that we've often spoken about this week, haven't we, about how modern and radical he could be at times. So, yeah, a few more details about the funeral, which will take place on Saturday. But, of course, we keep being reminded this is a very important family occasion. This is still a family in mourning at the moment, but hugely appreciative of all the messages they've had from across the UK and around the world, remembering a man that meant so much to them.
Yeah, and there a lot of speculation, Rhiannon, obviously, about his German relatives. And as you say, there are, I'm just seeing here, 3, I think, there, which is interesting of itself.
It is, but I think lots of people will reflect back on the time when Prince Philip married Princess Elizabeth, and actually at the time his German relatives weren't welcome to that wedding. It was so soon after the Second World War, and some of his sisters, of course, had spouses who had Nazi links. So there was this suspicion about them, understandably, and so they weren't invited to the wedding. But I think over the years we have seen the Queen and the Duke make visits to Germany. And yeah, I think it is that reflection of this being a family affair. Of course, we're so used to talking about those senior royals here in the UK, but I think really lovely to see that some of Prince Philip's side of the family have also been invited. But we kept being reminded today just how involved Prince Philip had been in the planning. But ultimately, it's the Queen who has had to sign off these final plans. And also, I think one thing that is worth mentioning is that none of the family are going to wear military uniform. And that in itself is interesting. Of course, there is going to be an enormous military presence, certainly inside the castle grounds here at Windsor. We keep being reminded that all of that ceremony is going to take place away from the public inside the castle grounds. But interestingly, that the family are not wearing military uniforms. You would, of course, expect that usually with a big ceremonial funeral like this. But I think the Queen and others within the family have decided that it's best that they wear mourning dress with medals. I think to make sure there isn't too much attention on, as you could describe it, recent family differences and those within the family who have stepped away from royal duties and had to step away from their military titles. I think for the family, the attention very much has to be on the Duke of Edinburgh, and they do not want too much discussion about problems that have happened within the family, certainly over the last year or so.
Absolutely. Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed.